Hello, I'm Cyan, welcome back. So the top 5 videos. Then we're going to go through the top 5 removed features from Minecraft Bedrock Edition, or Minecraft Pocket Edition as it used to be known. So the interesting thing about when they make new features and add new updates to this game is that they have to decide sometimes to remove old features to make room for these new features, or sometimes they just figure something is so outdated it needs to be taken away. And some of these features are really interesting, and although they necessarily, shouldn't make their way back into the game now, I think they're all pretty crazy to see, and that's why I wanted to share them all with you in today's video. Like if you do like it, because it helps out the channel, and let's say you do like seeing crazy mobs like this. Seriously, this was an NPC at one point in Minecraft Pocket Edition, but let's get straight into it, shall we? And let's start with the 5th, item on the list, which is actually going to be removed crafting recipes and a removed smelting recipe, because you used to be able to get dye in entirely different ways in Minecraft Pocket Edition. So the first one was that you used to be able to make cocoa beans by using either an ink sac and an orange dye together, or by using an ink sac, a red dye, and a yellow dye. Essentially, you could combine black and orange to get cocoa beans, essentially getting brown dye in that way. And the reason for this is because cocoa beans didn't spawn naturally in jungle. You couldn't properly, get them from cocoa pods, which meant that, they had to create a way for you to get the brown dye so you could make brown wool, make brown other things. And this is the solution they came up with. Again, they removed it later after they gave the official way, but it was really cool that at one point you used to be able to make cocoa beans. You didn't have to find a jungle. They also made it so that you could get red, rose red dye. Again, rose red's a bit weird to call it now, but you used to be able to get rose red just by putting a red mushroom in a furnace. And I like this one because it gave a real use to mushrooms. Like, if we're being entirely honest with ourselves, mushroom stew is like a real fringe use thing, and if you are going to use mushroom stew, you probably get it direct from the mushroom. So giving a use to the red mushroom itself outside of the block, I really like that personally. And then third, of course, we have the enchanted golden apple, the mega, the notch apple, the god apple. That was sadly removed too, and this is actually a quick public service announcement. There's only one platform of the game that has this recipe left, and it is the console edition. Make sure you craft them now while you can, because they'll just vanish one day like they did on Minecraft Pocket Edition, and it's sad, and we all feel the pain a little bit, because you can no longer get these outside of the treasure in Minecraft Pocket Edition. So these 3 recipes were removed, and honestly, I think one of them, mushroom into rose red, it would have been cool if it stayed, although it makes sense that because it's called rose red. And the cocoa bean thing, it's like, I guess people weren't probably even using that. And finally, there's the last one, which is really useful to know about before it goes, and it's a good example of why we need to know about these removed features, because sometimes it gives you a clue on what could be removed in the future. So speaking of things that changed all of a sudden, let's talk about the Cyan Flower. So the Cyan Flower is one of the most intriguing items to change in Minecraft's history, in my opinion, across all the versions, because get this, they used to have the rose in Minecraft Pocket Edition in the pre-development versions. However, to get the game certified, to get it into a release state where it could work on all platforms, they had to change the rose flower on, again, the other Minecraft versions into the Cyan Flower for Minecraft Pocket Edition. That's right, changing the color of this flower somehow fixed hardware issues. And although the details of that hardware issue have never been made perfectly public, the widespread belief, because they eventually fixed it back in 0.9, which is roughly when they dropped support for the Xperia Play, is that the Xperia Play could not support the red flower for some reason. So again, reasons for this are kind of vague and not really known, but the the easiest explanation is that the color palette on the Xperia Play just wasn't good enough to cover all the reds they needed in Minecraft as well as the rose. So the Minecraft Pocket Edition actually had, for several different updates covering years of the game, a light blue flower, the Cyan Flower. I mean, cyan's a light blue in my opinion, but it had a Cyan Flower in place of the rose just because they could not physically have the rose in the game. The reason they actually replaced it in the end is they replaced the Cyan Flower with the poppy, but when they did that, they confirmed that at some point they'd probably add the Cyan Flower back into the game. And although 0.9 was a long time ago, we're talking the olden days of 2014, it is still something that's potentially on the cards to be added back into the game. So yeah, the Cyan Flower, a lot of people miss it, and you might just see it come back to the game at some point. So let's talk about the third example now, which is of course the Nether Reactor core. I feel like you can't talk about Minecraft Pocket Edition exclusives or removed features or anything like that without failing to mention this, because this is one of the wackiest things in my opinion, and one of the things that drew me to realizing that the Pocket Edition was a unique version of the game way back when I started making videos for it in the early alpha days. So yeah, the interesting thing about the Nether Reactor core is it was a solution to the lack of a nether problem. So again, although you might be like, okay, so they had to, remove the rose from a flower because that's too much color. Well, a real limitation on the Pocket Edition for quite some time was the nether. They couldn't get the nether to run on those versions. They never decided to update it into the game until much later, 0.12. So in the meantime, they added something called the Nether Reactor. The Nether Reactor, if you activated it, would turn into this red core, and then it would create a huge, chamber of nether, wreck around you, and it'd be like a miniature nether that you created in the overworld. It was a cute little, alternative to the nether, and it was one of the features they added to the game, and that still technically exists in the game today, but you have to inventory edit it. You can't get it through like commands and stuff, and the exact uses for it is pretty much none because you can barely even place them. But theoretically speaking, they're not fully removed. They're just removed from every purpose, can't be achieved in game, and can't be placed in game, and that is why I wanted to mention them, because it's 3 blocks that count as 1 block that that create just the strangest, remove features from Minecraft Pocket Editions past the Nether Reactor core. And it's kind of funny because, again, the version of the game that is now the primary version, Minecraft Bedrock is the one they clearly want to focus on as a company. Way back, even in, just a few years ago, they used to not even have the Nether. They used to have like a pretend Nether in the overworld, and there's just something about that. They go like, oh, that's kind of, that shows not only that how far the game used to be back then, but also how much progress it's made in those 3 years since the Nether Reactor core was the only Nether. So let's next talk about one of the weirdest features in this whole video, because it's going to be the NPC. So the NPC was an entirely unintentionally added feature to the game. It looked like this. Seriously, look at this thing. It's like a villager, except you can tell it's clearly meant to be a bit more human than a villager. She's got like hair that's actually flowing onto her arms. She's wearing like some farmer clothing. It looks like, if they took a person and decided to make that person into a Minecraft villager, which, by the way, golden idea for an app right now. What would you look like as a Minecraft villager? This looks like someone, who lives in the rural country, put themselves into the app, and it was a real mob that existed in the Minecraft game for a little bit during 0.16. So this actually was one of the very few features that most people don't know about. Most people don't know it was removed from the game because it only existed for some of the betas of the 0.16.0 update. And the reason it was actually added to the game is kind of funny because it still exists in the Education Edition. It's just they crossed some wires because those two games come from the same code base, and they accidentally threw an Education Edition feature into the main game, which, funnily enough, ties us into our very last feature, the best removed feature from Minecraft Pocket Edition or Minecraft Bedrock Edition, because it's just the most confusing and the most detailed in terms of like how many times they've tried to make this thing work. It is the camera item. So the camera item, again, it's one of these weird things where you're like, oh no, that's not a real thing, right? And if you look it up, it's like, oh, it's from the Education Edition. It's in the Education Edition right now, but it was actually added in the very earliest days of Minecraft Pocket Edition. It existed in the 0.1 build. It's that old of a feature. So let's talk about the feature because it's got such a weird, history. It initially existed as a way to take screenshots in the game because it could remove your GUI. So it was added in 0.1, like I mentioned, and it existed in the game. You could use it if you did some inventory editing. Then they tried to hide it even more from the game. They removed some of its textures. They made it invisible. They made a bunch of changes to the item to kind of make it less usable. And then for people who did want to take screenshots, they made a hide GUI feature on the Pocket Edition so that you could just take screenshots in the game itself. And then they eventually decided to remove it in 0.9 because they decided why even have the camera anymore. But in 0.14 they added it back. They updated it. They made it a real item again that could be accessed through inventory editing. Then in 0.16 they decided actually why do we have this thing again? They removed it one more time from the game, and then later on in the Education Edition they decided let's use that same camera that went all the way from 2011 in the Pocket Edition, and they put it into that version of the game. So yeah, the camera was essentially a way to take pictures in Minecraft Pocket Edition, but most people know it as just the wacky block that people would edit into the game because again, most people didn't care about that initial use. Most people just used it as a way to show that they'd found something really rare because the game developers deliberately oscillated it. It wasn't found for a year after the game came out for the first time because again, you had to hack the item ideas, get them in there, get the ID, put them in there, and basically just all the steps they made to make the item tricky to use made it this very rare, very tricky to get item that kind of like the update block today, where you can be like, I'm proud, I found this ridiculous looking block. Some people really like the camera for its use back in the day, and although very few people use this for its original purpose outside of Mojang and people doing like press release stuff for Minecraft, like again, like a tiny fraction of people were using it for its intended purpose. Most people used it as a very rare, and if you played Minecraft all the way back then, you would have seen it every now and then in someone's world and been like, hey, you found something cool there, didn't you? And that's one of my favorite just little kind of almost Easter eggs of Minecraft, a thing that was in the game that got removed, added to the game, got removed, and is now technically in a version of the game. That is the camera, one of the most removed items in Minecraft's history. It's been removed a full 3 or 4 times now, depending on how you want to count it, and added to the game a full 3 or 4 times now, and that's something that you can't say for many other features. But with that said, I hope you all enjoyed this video. Like it if you did like it, because it helps out the channel a lot. Let us know you do like the top 5s, share if you really liked it, and subscribe if you're new around here with notifications turned on if you want to keep on seeing top 5s and other such videos daily on this channel. So, thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you all in the next one. Goodbye.